Okay. Hello, everybody. It is Monday, June 7th, 2021, 10:30 Pacific time. This is the community and open source work stream of the Inclusive Naming Initiative. I am your host today, Celeste. Stephen Augustus and Jason Brooks, who are also leads of this work stream, are also on the call. Once more, you should have access to edit the agenda, and I would appreciate if you could add your names to the attendees. So in typical me fashion, I'm going to jump around this a little bit back and forth, so I apologize. I have an action item here for me, which is now that I have access to the Zoom account for the Inclusive Naming Initiative, I need to go in and upload all of the past meeting recordings to YouTube. So this is an action item in here for me, but please hold me accountable to this. And if you do not see those meetings in that nice little recording bracket linked next week, swing the hammer.
Well, also, action item for me is to actually tell the leads how to have access to all of the YouTube playlists, which is probably not done yet. So
okay.
Someone swing hammers in our general direction.
I mean, so yeah, how about this? I will attempt to do this, and then I'll probably go, Stephen, I don't know how to do this, and this will spur both of us into action. Okay.
Fair.
So, what I have down on the agenda is actually action items from last week. However, we also have some issues that have been open for a while that I think we can start closing off pretty soon. I'm actually going to start not at the project board review, but
DCI.
Yeah, I'm going to start at the DCI lint configuration. So there's a bunch of notes, but last week we discussed Peter's submission of a DCI lint configuration for the recommendations that we have. The conclusion that this group came to was, first off, we definitely want this in a separate repository. But second off, before we can submit this, we need to think about governance and processes and action items. Would you like to speak a little more to that, Stephen?
Yeah, let me just find that unmute button. Yeah, so there's also an active thread happening in Slack, which I will link here. Notes. Lots of thoughtful discussion. I think where I'm at on it is absolutely should exist. What I worry about is the INI endorsing one tool, which I think kind of leads into the machine readable format for recommendations. Like if we could agree on a format and suggest a set of tools, not to say this is the one tool that you would use, I would be happy with that. But I think the initial holdup on this PR was it doesn't belong in website.
Yeah.
It belongs in possibly the org repo, or if we rename org to community, or if we create a separate repo.
So I personally think this should be in its own repo. I think that repo should be titled something along the lines of like linter configs. I don't know, that's a little specific. But
so I think it's going to depend on what we want to accomplish in that repo. If it is a set of linter configs, maybe a separate repo. If it is a set of suggestions about linters to use, then I think it can live in the community repo.
So one question, I think I recall in Slack that we were talking about starting a list of curated tools in general, not just lint. So could we possibly call the repo tools And then as the list grows, we can get more specific if that's helpful for folks to filter and things like that. But I don't think that will be the first or the last tool that we, that we put on a site like that for folks.
Right. So sorry, Karthik has his hand up as well. Karthik, go for it.
Yeah, I was actually thinking like instead of recommending or having a tool within us, there are a lot of tools like this. We should probably have something as a spec definition, like how in the tech world that is being the standard. Like say for example, service mesh. So you have SMI spec, and there are a lot of service mesh tools, and the containers like OCI spec, and you have a lot of container tooling there. So we should have the specs as like some kind of inclusive some spec defined, and it should be a standard which like bulletins which defines, okay, these are all the default of stuffs like that, and this is like mandatory steps, and you could use any tool which is in compliance with that.
So yeah, so there is an issue open for a machine readable and parsable format for this in the see if I can go dig it up. But yeah, that's exactly what that would be.
I was gonna say like more, we don't want to have any tool by itself within inclusive naming org.
So I think we, as it stands, we don't hold any of these tools, right? But we've gotten a series of recommendations, whether it be DCI lint or woke, that could be potential things that we would suggest, right? I think to your point, the machine readable, the machine readable idea, someone mentioned it in the org repo, so we should tackle that. Like if all of these tools, like we don't necessarily care about the implementation, but we should provide the baseline spec for the implementation. I think that would be a reasonable path forward for sure.
Okay. So I have a question which I think will maybe help sort this out a little, which is, as a group, do we want to prefer developing our own kind of data format for recommendations, or do we want to prefer supporting third-party formats? Like, I think that's the question we're at, and I think we just need to make a decision.
So my opinion, at least, is that we have had, so as part of these tool suggestions, people have developed their own data formats, and I think I think the aggregate of those data formats is probably the one that we want.
Okay.
I agree with that, Stephen. I would not want to just prescribe and lock out folks who've already started. So I think that's one of the values of having the inventory of what have people done. Back to, I think, one of the issues we've already opened.
Yep, and I actually opened a pull request. It's in the agenda for review, which is further on. So I guess my question for the DCI lint config is, what are our next steps? I think one is closing the pull request in website.
Yeah, I can leave a closed comment on that, and to say, hey, the next Peter is actually on the call. Peter, you're the one who submitted the PR, right?
That's right. So
Okay.
I was late 5 minutes. I
No, it's
apologize.
absolutely
You're fine,
fine.
you're
Thank you
fine.
so much for joining.
So yeah, I think if you joined after we started talking about this, where I'm at is that we should have a set of suggestions, I think, of potential tools to use. Ideally, further in the future, we have a machine readable spec that any tool who writes an inclusive naming language checker or linter or displayer can use. But I think what worries me about putting a one tool by itself on the website is it feels like an endorsement. So I don't think that the website is the right place for this PR. So I'm going to close it out. That is essentially going to be my close message. But we're going to take the action. There are a few issues open already for machine readable data formats, as well as doing inventory of OSS tools that are already doing this kind of work. And I think that like DCI lint will definitely be in that list.
Okay, so I'm just kind of compiling like actionable next steps here. So one, we're going to close that PR on the website, and don't worry about this, Peter. We'll take care of it.
Okay. That
So
sounds good to me. That's all I
yeah.
need. Thank you.
Yep. We will probably ask you to reopen it at some point in the future, but for now it's going to get closed. I think we need to create a repo to house things, either data or tools or specs or something.
So my suggestion with this, because we're also in the part of like, we don't necessarily have all of the reviewers and approvers that we want inside of the org. I would like to maybe hold off on creating a repo immediately. I think that we have a folder in the org repo already that we can dump ideas into. And if it turns into like, now we have specs, now we have other things now, and it turns into like, it's the size that warrants a repo and building repo structure around, then sure.
I am going to counter that
Mhm.
with an information architecture concern. And the information architecture concern is if I'm somebody digging around looking for a data spec of some sort, I'm not going to look in a repo called org.
Yeah, I agree.
So one of my prior suggestions was to rename the repo to make it more clear what it's about.
Yeah, to be fair, it's a completely ambiguous name at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah.
okay, how about the action item on this is that Stephen and I decide what
Jam
we
on
want to do.
something.
Yeah.
We'll jam on something.
Can I join that conversation,
Yeah.
please?
Absolutely. Well,
No, the only reason I'm saying is I've been going through a lot of work recently about moving stuff from repos, re-architecting things that we thought it was easy to put one place first. And I really don't want to live through that again. Selfishly, right?
No, I think that's
So
completely fair.
let's
But yeah.
let's think through it a little bit.
I would be fine. I would be
Yeah.
fine creating the new repo if it means that, now that you say that, Dale, like adding tombstones to things and like, oh, this link is broken. Like, okay, well, go over here and then it'll. Yeah, no, I'd be fine with creating a new repo if that means that we don't have to encounter that later.
I guess that is the reason like most of us don't want to involve in that conversation. Like look
Oh,
back
yeah.
and say like,
Yeah.
"Dude, I did this and I don't want to do this again."
Well, I mean, the other thing I think about is like, imagine a future. So something that I don't think everybody on this call is aware of, because it's been happening with Priyanka and I, like via the Linux Foundation's porous channels, is we actually have two like potential customers for our list of recommendations. And by customers, I mean like they're not going to pay for this. One is actually LFIT staff who is hoping to start scanning its repositories. And another is a company that is in many ways loosely affiliated with the LF and LF people called Blue Bracket, who do security scans. And what they're looking for is lists of words to start consuming. And if I think about it from like a true customer use case perspective, what they're going to want is they're going to want something pull to clean down, or clean to pull down rather, as a dependency, right? They're going to say like, I want this one repo. I extract it into my project and I go to the races. Like, and I think even more ideally for them would be like an NPM dependency or whatever, right?
So yeah, I have emotions, but they're mostly related to the fact that right now, I think as a body, we have not provided recommendations. Like, we have not provided like the list of recommendations. So what I worry about in using a tool that has already provided a list of recommendations is that we are essentially endorsing those recommendations as well, right?
Cool.
So if the tool uses our spec and they have their own recommendations and someone uses the tool, that's okay with me. If someone else develops a set of recommendations and we endorse the tool as INI, and we have not properly vetted those recommendations, that's something I don't feel good about.
Yeah, I think
I'm with you.
And again, I think for the use case that I've heard is they're hoping to source. They're hoping to pull rather than to push necessarily. And I think that's...
So they, as in our potential customers, are looking to pull are you looking to use a spec or have a set of recommendations? Because those are
They're
two
looking to
different.
use a spec.
Okay, all right.
Because there are a lot of, and I think that's like the emerging use case that I'm seeing from all of 2 data points. Is there's a lot of people who are wanting to do this work, but they don't have the expertise to do it, right? They're looking for somebody who has the expertise so that they can say, okay, well, if we pull this list, we might not screw it up too badly, which I think
Right.
is like a perfectly reasonable thing for, I think that's both reasonable and quite intelligent.
Yeah, and
So,
Mhm.
sorry. So when you say like they are going to use, which means like probably our framework of evaluating the words and the list of recommendations we have so far, is that what they're going to use, correct?
They're looking for lists of recommendations.
List
Like
of
they don't even really
recommendations,
care
okay.
about the evaluation part.
see.
Like that's the part that they're looking to outsource, if you really think about it.
okay,
Okay.
so that is different. That's a different need,
Yeah.
right? And that's actually like Workstream language, not us.
I mean, it's a little bit Workstream language, just a little
It's-
bit here.
It's both, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
like we don't have a tool today. If we had a spec, the spec would not contain recommendations. We could
Yeah.
eventually seed the spec with recommendations
Yeah.
and say, here's the default
Yep.
INI recommendations, but that does not exist today.
Correct.
Let me present to you a link that I dropped in the agenda. So a few weeks ago, the language workstream did come up with what its intended recommendation template is going to look like. There is a markdown file that exists. So in theory, you could start building based on that markdown file. However, looking at the file, it is very much as a writer, I look at this and I understand what this document is. But as a technologist, I would not understand how to build a good spec out of this. There's not enough data points. As a writer, what this is a style sheet. This is how
Yeah.
writers make language recommendations to other writers. But from the perspective of writing like a spec or like a JSON file, what you really need is like, what is the term you're trying to catch a hit for? What is the term that you're hoping to replace it with? And what is the warning level? Like those are the 3 things that you need, with an optional description field if you want to provide more context.
Right.
So what I actually think is we need to take the current set of recommendations for the language workstream, or the current, recommendation template. And I think we need to draft a spec off of that and say, okay, like what are we missing and where do we need the language workstream to produce more data points so that the recommendations spec will be realized. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes. So I would also say that like for this customer, for the set of customers, their end state is I want a set of recommendations, right? So the spec does not provide that to them and the template doesn't provide that to them. What like from language, what I, maybe this is a cross workstream effort, right? We're both evaluating the tools that have been suggested to us already, as well as the recommendations that have been provided by those tools, right? And saying like, these are recommendations that we also recommend, right? And eventually pushing those into a spec.
So time, because I don't think that none of the people that I've talked to who are looking to consume are looking to contribute recommendations.
I
and
wasn't
more-
saying, hold on. I wasn't saying
Okay.
that they were looking to contribute recommendations. It sounds like if I'm understanding the problem correctly, it sounds like what they want is a tool that will solve the problem for them, which is like preloaded with recommendations, right? That the spec does not solve that for them. A template does not solve that for them. They want, whatever tool install, go install, blah, right?
Let's talk about this offline because there's 2 slightly different use cases there.
Yeah.
I have one last thing to add on.
Could I make a request? Could we actually
Sure.
document the use cases?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just so we're not
Ooh.
assuming this is what it wants. Simple, right? Who are the actors? What is it what's it,
Yep.
user story. And so when we look at it, if new others come in and they fit that slot, we have it. Also,
Yep.
we're not speculating on what is in and out of scope for that request. Okay.
Completely
Um,
agreed.
I have
Okay.
one last
Um,
thing to add as a developer, like a tool developer. So I pinged in the Zoom chat, like, so I created this actions on GitHub to, report if any user is creating a issue which has like non-inclusive language, it would actually comment addressing the user, like saying, okay, you have this particular list of non-inclusive language, you need to like kind of, remove that and rephrase that. So if you look at the marketplace link I placed it earlier, I actually made a note there. As of now, the repo owner can create a comma separated list of words, but once we have something that can be machine readable as a recommended alternatives from INI, this tool will actually use that instead of like relying on the own user. So from the developer standpoint, this is what we are actually expecting from the INI. So INI should give us a list of recommendations which can be machine readable and parsable, and this tools like we develop can use that to do the recommendation. So this is like simple use case. I just wanted to bring it up.
So
Mhm.
Karthik, would you mind dropping that in the notes instead of the Zoom chat, and then
Oh,
also
yeah,
dropping a note,
sure. Sorry. Yeah.
dropping a note to your tool in the discussion on GitHub around machine parsable
Sure, I'll do it.
formats. Charles, you have your hand up.
So one example I've been trying to help with is like open source educational resources. And I think it's called open source mainframe for education. And so this is in relation to an example of how it could be implemented, where what they're trying to do is set up platforms for educational institutions that don't necessarily have the resources to build servers or online platforms or content management systems. And having that, what we would refer to as like an API. So the tool that you just feed things to or pull things from, and you can apply them to use for, let's say, building subject a curriculum. So you build a curriculum and you put the things you want to teach into it, and it can kind of extract it and put it into a learning format. But you also want to be able to control the kinds of words you use that may not be politically correct, to put it simply. So is that the kind of thing that is being described, where you want to be able to have a simpler way to quickly clean up things or tag things that may be inappropriate in a resource that you're trying to use?
So I think we're talking about, I think during this conversation, we've talked about like maybe 3 different things.
Yep.
And I think there's a phased approach to get us all of them, right? So one is so if I don't want to be a contributor, if I'm looking to be a consumer, I want a tool that I can run against thing, right? And it will do stuff, right? And the stuff should be like, it should tell me everything I need to know. Like if it's going to be a word list and recommendations, like the word list is theoretically complete, right? So that's one aspect of it, right? I'm a consumer, I want to do this thing, and I don't want to be involved in the production of like the process behind it. There's another part where it's from the perspective of creators and recommenders. We have some responsibility to maybe provide recommendations to seed one of these tools, right? There's another portion of it where, as people who want to create something that is an API or machine readable content, we need a format for that content, right? And then ideally, we can ship that format to people who are already using or have already created tools, right? And then there's like a further phase out where maybe we write our own tool that is the aggregate of all of these tools that have existed before, or there are donations, so on and so forth, right? But we are talking, yeah, but I think we've covered like 3 different topics that are kind of like commingled, but not the same thing.
Yeah, but Charles's use case is a little different from each one you described, because it takes, he really is looking for the end case, which is we've curated the content, we've described what defined the APIs or the aggregate API standards for to make it machine readable, and now I'm actually going to use it to use with content that we're creating. So it will flag terms as non-inclusive, and maybe even flag replacement terms. And one of the reasons I asked us to inventory, because I know there are tools that are available that does that today, that provides context, that provides recommended replacements. Some of them are proprietary, very expensive. And so what we want to look at is what exists in open source, where are those along the maturity scale? And is there anything we can do to accelerate so that Charles's use case can be supported,
Yeah.
right?
I'm not sure if any of us had a chance to respond to her, but Lindsay, was it Lindsay? Is it Lindsay?
Lindsay.
Not this Lindsay. It's not Lindsay who's on call. It's
Yeah.
no, sorry, Caitlin something. She is the creator of Woke, and
Okay.
she is on our mailing list. I'm not sure if we got back to her, but we should, because she's
Okay.
interested in getting
Okay.
together.
So we are at the end of the half hour, which brings me to a housekeeping item, which I will ask this meeting as well as the Leeds meeting half an hour ago. Is this meeting long enough? Do we need to extend it? I am very hesitant to ask for people's time, but I really don't feel like it's a long enough meeting.
Yeah, I think we have to
15
extend
minutes.
it every week. Every time we've had it, it feels like we've run out of time.
15 minutes though, not 30 minutes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
Okay.
we talked about, I think we talked about this in one of the previous meetings too. And it's like the 45, 50-minute mark is what makes more sense, I think, for this
Okay.
one, especially now that it has expanded scope.
Yeah.
So I can kick out, are we okay with keeping this time slot at least
Yes.
on Monday, or do
Should we
people
vote?
yeah, do people want a doodle so that they can vote on new slots?
Let's just, how many of us are here? I don't know if we have a
Just-
quorum.
Yeah.
Yeah, take the current and add 15 minutes and
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Okay.
probably the easiest. Okay.
Okay,
Steven, that's on you. Thank you so much.
got it.
Steven, Celeste and I will, Steven, Dale and I will jam on this. There's
Okay.
a few other action items that I will pull out from the agenda. Thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weeks.
Later, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.